Welcome to our first tutorial, and this tutorial we shall be looking at Python variables. A variable is basically like a container that is used to store a value, and we looked at examples of them when we said x was assigned to 5, x was the variable name, 5 was the variable, and we are storing the 5 within the container x. So in this tutorial we shall look at how to create variables. We look at casting in basic, not so deep. Then we also look at rules for creating variable names, multi-word variable names, how they actually done in Python, and we also close our tutorial by looking at global variables. So let's dive into our interpreter and see how we can actually create variables and actually implement what this is about. Okay. A variable is basically a container that is used to store data values. And when I type that x is assigned to 5, this is how we actually create a variable. The moment you assign a value to a certain variable name. So in this case, x is the variable name and 5 is the variable. So by doing this, we are actually creating a variable. We also have another variable, maybe which are letters. Maybe y is maybe a name. Let's call it a name, maybe Ronald. Sorry, I started with a small letter, but it's coding. So this is how you would actually create a variable name for a string. We refer to this as a string in Python. So I could print these two out. Let me print out, sorry, this is capital. Python is case sensitive. Print is in capital letters, is in small letters, not in capital letters. Let's also print out the value of capital Y. Now that if you print the value of small y, you'll get you'll get an error because Python is case sensitive. So let's run this module and see what we get. Okay. So you can see that we actually have on running that, our shell brings two answers. The first one is 5, which was actually the integer, and then lastly it brings us Donald. Okay, let's exit this shell. We're going to exit this shell. Okay, and then we look at our next part. So we are then going to look at casting. Casting basically is used to specify the type of the variable that you're actually dealing with. I could have a value of maybe x being assigned to 5, but I want to treat this value as a float. So I put the word float behind it, and I put the 5 within brackets. Okay, this is called casting. If I now print out the value of x, this is going to give me 5.0 because it has changed to a decimal point. Okay, if it kept as an integer, then I would just have 5 as my final solution. Let's look at what actually our shell gives us. It gives us 5.0. Get the point? So if I have maybe my value of y being assigned to string, but I want to make this 3, I want to take this 3 as a string. Okay, one of the ways to know the type of the variable, we shall look at it in the next tutorial. But if I print the value of y, my value of y will have been converted into a string. Okay, so we use this in a lot. For example, if you want to combine a string with a number, you have to first convert that number to a string, as we shall see in our tutorials that are coming ahead. Let's say you want to, maybe you're printing, you want to truncate. We have our value of m, which is actually something like 79.9. But I want to make this m an integer. In other words, I want to truncate it. I will just put an int behind it because an integer does not have floating values. So when you put int behind it and you then run this code, let's actually print out the value of m, print the value of m, and then run this. This actually gives us 79 because we have converted 79.9 from a floating value to an integer. This could be used like when you're entering marks and you want to have a system that actually truncates. Okay, maybe an A is between 80 and 100, but whoever is below 80, you cut the mark to the integer. So this is how we do it in one of those systems, and we call that Python casting. So to get the type of the integer actually dealing with, we know that this m has actually become an integer. If I print the type, of m, and I run this. Let's save it. Ask me to save it. Okay. They are going to tell me that m is actually an integer because it was 79.9, and I then later converted it into an integer, and I'm trying to find out the type of its data type. Is it an integer? Is it a string? And you can say telling us that actually the class of m is an integer. Let's say we had something like maybe name is assigned to James, and I want to print out the type of name. Okay, so if I run this, it tells me that name is actually of class string. Let's see that in our shell. Okay, name is actually of class string. So that is how you're able to get the data type of any variable within Python. So if you're actually doing strings, we shall later look at in the next tutorials, you could choose to use single quotes or double quotes. Using single quotes or double quotes to actually initialize your string. But issues come in if, for example, I want to write, maybe I'm going to write something like, it's a dog. In this case, the compiler actually gets confused if you're actually telling it to close the comment at this endpoint or at this endpoint. Okay, when you actually run this, let's actually print, we're going to print name. When you print name, we are going to get an error. Reason, the compiler is actually confused if you are either closing at this point or this point. So how do we do it? How do we solve this kind of error? Number one, you can put a backslash before this hyphen. What this tells the compiler is that whenever you see a backslash, don't mind about whatever is coming after the backslash. So we are able to actually print it out. Okay, let's run this and see. We shall not have an error this time. Okay, let me see the interpreter. It's actually here. You see, we have it's a dog. It has actually come out very well. Okay, let me exit this shell. Get back to my line. Or another way you would do it, you would leave this backslash in, and then you put double quotes. Double quotes, you know, inside it's actually a apostrophe. So if I run this, this is still fine. Okay. This is still fine. It brings me the right printout. So it's a dog. You see that? So we can actually do that by using two methods, by using double quotes outside, and that gets eliminated. Though, however, there are in some situations when you are, for example, having a comment within, or maybe a quote, okay? Let's say, for example, a quote like, what quote can we use? A proverb, a quote, maybe the early bird. The early bird is the worm. But I would like to print out this together with its initial quotes, together with its double quotes. So what I do, I put a single quote outside and a single quote here. And this time when I print, okay, there are double quotes here and then a single quote. If I now print name, I'm going to get my double quotations within the printout that I have in my compiler. So the early bird catches the worm together with its double quotes. Another thing you have to know about Python variable names is that they are case sensitive. A variable name of capital N is different from a variable name of small n. If I try to run this, I will get an error because I have not initialized small n of name with small n anymore. So you have to consider the kind of case that you're actually dealing with. Okay? If you're trying to print out name, then use small n as your initialization. If you try to print out a different, whether it is of the same word but a different case, then you get a false solution. Okay. So let's look at variable rules for creating variables. Let's look at the different rules that are used to create Python variable names. We create a new file and let's save it as rules Py. Okay. Save it to okay. So rule number 1 is that a variable name must start with a letter or an underscore. We can have variable name as maybe name or underscore name. These are all suited to be variable names. When you're starting to write it, you either start with a number or an underscore. One thing you can't do, you can't start with a figure like 1, 2, 3 digits. You don't do that. Okay, so it's either a number. So this would be a very wrong variable name. So when writing a variable name, the first letter must be either an underscore or it must be a letter. It should never start with a number or a symbol. Then within the variable name, if I already have my name, I can include a list of numbers, anything inside. Underscores, they're also fine. So your variable name should only include letters, numbers, and underscores within it. But when you're writing it in the beginning, you should actually start with only either the underscore or a letter. Then variable names are actually case sensitive. A variable name h may be assigned to 8 and a variable name h assigned to 8. These two variable names are actually different. Okay, so when you try to print out the h, you will get something different. Okay, you'll only get 8. You'll get the initial value. Let's make this 7 to distinguish between them and run that. Okay, so we're only able to get a 7. You know, because it is a variable, if the name was actually the same, the solution should have changed. But you can clearly say that you only got 7 because the variable names were actually 2. They were different. So they are case sensitive. If you're using h, endeavor to only use h throughout. Okay. Those are the different rules that are actually governing Python variable name creation. Next, let's look at multi-word variable names. Multi-word variable names. So these are, for example, if you want to write a name like school name, okay, maybe let's also put there current. So if it is like this, it might really confuse the reader. So we have the different stylings that we use to actually do this multivariable name assignment. And the first one is actually called Pascal case. And a Pascal case, every letter starts with a capital letter. For example, we could write that okay, first letter is capital, others are small. From a school, will be assigned to any college that you would want to, okay? Any college, for example, let's put, maybe it's called Dickens College, okay? Maybe Dickens College. So this is called Pascal case, okay? You could even have, let's write my former school. So the first letter would be capital, the next one small. Every time you're starting a new word, use a capital letter. This helps the reader to easily read and understand whatever you're writing. Number two, we also have the snake case. And under the snake case, we separate every word with an underscore. For example, we have my underscore, comma, underscore, case. And then we assign it to the same thing, maybe. Okay. So this is called snake case. For it, you put an underscore after every word. So the last one is actually called Camel case, and this is what I actually also use. Most developers prefer using this, but for Camel case, the first word, the first letter of the first word takes a small letter. Then the other words take capital letters. So we have my, former, school, assigned to whatever I want to assign it to. Maybe it is Harvard. Okay. So these are the different the different cases, the different ways we initialize multi-word variable names. My simple advice is that if you're really coding if you're really writing lines of code, you should actually stick to one case so that you do not have issues of having wrong variable names. Not that this variable name is actually different from this variable name. So you have to stick to one kind of style. This one is different from Pascal. If you choose to use this, then later on mix this within your code, you're going to get error. So if you choose to use Pascal case, stick to that. Snake case, stick to that. In this tutorial, I'll be using Camel case because that is what I'm actually so conversant with. But you could also find what you're really conversant with. Okay, so let's look at assigning multiple variables. Assigning multiple variables. So if we have multiple variables and we want to put them in a single line, for example, we have X, Y, and Z, and we are assigning them to different items like maybe there is going to be furniture, maybe like a desk, maybe like a table, maybe like this kind of furniture, chair, okay, chair, something like that. And what this means is that actually X takes the desk value, Y is the table, and Z is the chair. That is what this basically means. If I print out my value of X, also print out my value of Z, I expect to get only desk and chair because X corresponds to desk, Z corresponds to chair. Let's run this and verify that. Okay, you see that we have only this and check. So if you have multiple variables, you could just basically assign them like that and have a shorter line of code. Okay, as I said, you could have 100 lines of code. I have maybe 20 lines of code, but we are all implementing the same logic. It's about how you really become a good developer. And the less the number of codes of line that you have, actually, the faster that your compiler is able to read through what you're telling it to implement. So let's also look at if you have one value corresponding to several digits. For example, we have like X, Y, and Z. Let's say all is equal to 2. We don't do it like that. We put equal signs everywhere. What this basically means is that actually X is equal to Y is equal to Z and is equal to 2. So whenever you print those values, you always get a 2. This happens when you have variable names that are actually taking similar values. So you just, you don't have to go on initializing on every line. Just put them in a single line like that and proceed. If you actually run it, let's run it and see what we get. So you're getting 2, 2, because both X and Z were taking up values of 2. Then let's also look at unpacking a collection of information. So unpacking the collection, this time around we shall just use a set, but in later series we shall look at more advanced data collection tools that are used in Python. So let's create a list. We're going to create a list of maybe suites. You could have, this is how you create a list. You put those square brackets, then you start typing in whatever you want. You could have an orange suite. You always have red suites. Then we could have a green suite. So if I have, oh wait, this is not suite, this is suite. Okay. If I want to print out these different values, I would just assign them different variable names, X, Y, Z, and assign this to the list of suites. So what this actually means is that X is taking up the value for orange, Y taking up the value for red, and Z is actually taking up the value for green. So if I print X, so print Y, then print out Z. Let's run this and see what we get at our output. We're able to print out all of them because we printed out all the 3, and we're not going to get an error. This is how we do it. So if you have a list, you can assign the same number of variable names to the number of elements in that pack, then you really get a solution. And this is what our interpreter gives us. We have orange, red, and green. Okay. Let's first exit the shell. Okay. So outputting variable names, we output variable names by actually printing, but sometimes we want to have different styles of actually outputting our variable names. Sorry, our variables. So for example, if I have information like X is assigned to Python, Y is assigned to maybe is, it says Z is assigned to DOP. Let me say maybe M is assigned to the statement with, I'm called JB. So I want us to print out this statement in a single line. If you print out X, Y, Z, and M differently, you'll have them on different lines. But if I want to print them on the same line, I just print X, Y, Z, M. So, and I then run this. Let's run this. and then see what you get. So we are printing out X, Y, Z, M. Let the compiler bring out our solution. Okay, you see, Python is doped with JB. It has actually printed our text in a single line. Okay, so when you print it like that, it goes in a single line. Let's see another one. Another way you can actually have this as an output. If I use plus, and then I put a plus here, and I also put up a plus here, and I actually then run this, it brings me something that is almost the same but slightly different, and it's looking quite ugly. Okay, you've seen it. You see, we have Python is doped with JB, but this time around the words are actually combined together. And the reason for this space is just because when I was assigning, I left there this space. That's why you have this space. But otherwise, if it was a different text, then we would have all of them joined together. So to avoid like that kind of appearance, you would simply do this. You would come to Python, maybe here, add a space at the end, add a space there. So when I actually print this, it caters for the space that I've left within my code. That would be the easiest way to do it. If you're trying to use addition sign, that is actually called string concatenation. You really see this is slightly different compared to what I actually had in the beginning. And this is looking much better. But issues come in if you want to use this kind of printing, but you have numbers, maybe X is a 5. X is a number 5. So if you want to do this, you're adding an integer to a string, this is going to be an error. It won't actually work. You see? Because you cannot add a number to a string. You cannot add a number to a string. So what do we do? To actually implement that, it will be basically, we'll use Python casting like we had done last time. Just turn this to a string. If you turn this to a string, you've really stated that this 5 is a string, and then you run this module. This is going to be fine because it is very fine to add up to strings. String concatenation is really fine. So when you're dealing with numbers within strings, you have to use, you have to first cast the integer into a string. Sometimes you want to print out, maybe you're designing a school grading system, and you want to print out something like the total is something. So you have to convert that total value that actually computed into a string by casting. Okay. And still, if they were just numbers, like for example, X being 5 and Y being something like 7, and then you want to print out the value of 5 shift plus 7. No, let's say string. Let's try to concatenate them. X plus 1. This would actually give you the sum. Okay, it doesn't give you 57. It's going to give you 12. So with integers, you'll get 12 if you try to do concatenation. Otherwise, if you want to get 57, the only thing you need to do is just to cast them. Definitely, if you cast them, you'll get a 5 and a 7. Okay. If I convert this to a string by casting it, and I also convert this to a string from an integer, and I run this, we're going to have a 5 and a 7 because they're actually strings. Okay, it is actually 57. So you have 5 plus 7 is 57. Very wrong mathematics. But anyway, it's because they are strings. Okay. But still, if I have a 5, which is actually an integer, I could actually have a 5, which is an integer, and maybe I have Y, which is actually a string. Let me just put in a 5. I want to put something like 5 years old. So the other 5 is an integer. This will be fine. I do not concatenate this. The way to output this would be as simple as putting a comma, so that my final output is going to be 5 years old. But if I concatenate them by addition, it really doesn't work. Okay, you have 5 years old. So that is how we would actually print out different outputs. You can have your own way of doing it. You could decide to first cast codes be different, but what matters is having the most precise code. And Python is very easy. We don't have very hard syntax. Okay, let's look at our final part under variables, and we shall be looking at global variables. A global variable. So global variables are those variables that can actually be used everywhere within your code. All the variables we've been looking at actually have been global variables. A local variable is that variable that cannot be used globally. It can only be used within that block of code, usually inside functions. If I have a variable like x being assigned to 5, we refer to this as a global variable. Okay, but if I have a function, maybe this, I don't mind about this, we shall cover functions later, but this is how we hit a function in Python. Don't worry, for those who have not done code, don't worry understanding what it means, we shall look at it. So this is how we write a function. I'm going to call it my func, and that is the syntax. And I have a variable, maybe y, which is assigned to 6. Okay. So this 6 here is actually referred to as a local variable. This variable cannot be used everywhere within code. It is local. For example, if I try to print out the value of x, okay, let's print out the value of x. Some little time. Let's run this module again. There's a problem with the compiler, I guess. Okay, we're able to get a 5. Okay, and the reason we're able to get a 5 is because this 5 is actually a global variable. But let's try to print out y. When you print out y, which is actually a local variable, we are going to get an error because the compiler is not able to see y. Okay, because y is actually not defined. It is a local variable. So what we do? So this is what you call a local variable, so you call a global variable. Global variable, it can even be used even within a local environment. We could even include it there inside. It would actually work. But what we do to actually print it out, I would have to print it out. Actually, either I do this, I either print it out inside the same function. So I'm going to print out the value of y. And for me to implement this, still when I run this, I don't get anything at my output because I have not called my function. You're supposed to call your function. So you call my function, you call your function by writing its function name, which is actually my func. I guess it's right. Okay, so let's try to run that. And then you'll be able to get your value of 6. Though that 6 is actually a local variable. So to print out within the function, call the function for implementation, that is going to work. Because otherwise you will not be able to have its output. But to turn, you can also choose, if I want to print this outside my code, I turn this y into a global variable by using the global keyword. Just type global y. When you put in global y, you're actually telling the compiler that y has now become a global function. Then after calling this function, come down here and print out the value of y. Initially, before making it global, see, let's first remove this keyword. Let's just comment it out. When this global keyword is not in code, when it is commented out or not there, we shall get an error despite us calling the function because the compiler is not able to trace what y is. But after globalizing after making y a global variable, and you run that code, this makes it actually fine. Okay, because now it has been globalized. Okay, so you see you're able to get the solution. So this is all about variables, and let us meet in our 5th tutorial as we look at data types that are actually used in Python programming. Thank you very much.